Hi, I'm Anastasia McCune. Now, have you ever wanted to introduce an element of chance or randomness into your Captivate projects? Well, the problem is that there isn't a way within Captivate itself to generate a random number or any kind of chance like that, but there is in JavaScript. So I wanted to show you today how to use Captivate and JavaScript together to generate a random number, and then use that random number to send your user to different parts of your project randomly. Now I could just show you what the code is and tell you where to put it, and that's it, done really quick, no explanation, but I'm going to take a few minutes to explain things along the way. So this video is slightly longer, but hopefully you'll be able to use that information as you build your own Captivate projects. So today's sample will work in either Captivate 8 or Captivate 9. I'll be working in Captivate 9. And we've got just a few slides in our project. So we have a start slide, and when we click this button, we are going to generate our random number. And that random number will be 1, 2, or 3. If you get 1, then you will be taken to slide 2. If you get 2, you will be taken to slide 3. And if you get 3, you will be taken to slide 4. And then there's just an ending slide that all of the slides point to. So a pretty simple project. So to truly understand what's going on in JavaScript and in Captivate, you need to understand what a variable is. And you might have run into these already if you've used advanced actions in Captivate. If you haven't, that's fine. So think of a variable like a container, maybe a bucket. And in that bucket, you can put any number of things. You could put orange juice in it, and then you could pour that orange juice out and then put water in it instead. Then you could pour the water out and you could put rocks in it, or you could put fish in it, or whatever you want. The point is that if you have the bucket, if you can grab that handle on the bucket, you can get at any of the contents that is in the bucket. And so it's the same thing with variables. If you know the name of a variable, then you can get at the content that is contained within that variable. So variables in Captivate and JavaScript could contain things like a user's name, perhaps, a number that could be a score maybe, or a percentage that they got on a quiz. You could create a flag that says if something is true or false. You could contain something like a date, perhaps. Variables ideally have names that describe what they contain. So examples would be user first name or random number. That's much better than variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, variable 4, because you have no idea what's in that variable. So as you create variable numbers, try to give them names that make sense. And the contents of a variable can change over time. So example, maybe you have a variable called score, and that contains your score. And as you continue to play the game, your score goes up. So your variable can change over time. So getting Captivate and JavaScript to talk in many cases is like pouring items from a Captivate bucket or variable into a JavaScript bucket or variable, or vice versa, pouring from JavaScript back to Captivate. And we'll see an example of that in just a few minutes. So to give ourselves a little bit of a clue about what slide we're on and kind of make this project easier to work with as we go forward, we're going to use a variable. And there are many variables that exist in Captivate in each project that are already created for you, and you can access them at any time. So you can see here on slide 1, I've got this text box and it says slide. And I want to insert what slide we're on right here, and that's contained in a system variable. So I'm going to just double click within our box, and then I'm going to go down to the bottom right hand here where it says insert variable. And this gives us access to all the variables within Captivate. There are user-defined variables, which are variables that you as the developer create, and then there's also system variables, which are the ones that exist within Captivate, and you can grab them anytime you want. So I'm going to look for the variable called cpinfo current slide. There it is. And for this maximum length box, I'll leave it at 50. That just means that I'm going to make sure that there's 50 characters available for me to display the slide number. 50 characters should be just fine. So I'll click OK, and you can see here that our Captivate variable is going to be displayed here, and it is delineated by the fact that it has these dollar signs at the beginning and at the end. So if I quickly click through the rest of my slides, you can see that we already have cpinfo current slide displayed on the other slides as well. So now let's get ready to write the code that will give us a random number. So to do that, I'm going to select my Get Random Number button. Over here in the Properties area, in the Actions panel, I'm going to change the On Success from Go to Next Slide to Execute JavaScript. And I want to point out this little checkbox here that says Continue Playing the Project. I'm going to make sure that that is not selected. So here we have this little button that says Script Window. I'm going to click that, and this is where we're actually going to type in our JavaScript. There's actually kind of a bit to type in, so I'm just going to cheat and copy and paste it over here from my editor. So I'll copy it and I'll paste it, and I'll explain it for just a moment. So we have here a function, and that function is called getRandomInt. So the function is defined here, but it doesn't actually run until we call that function. So here's the definition, and then down here where we say getRandomInt, that's where we actually say, here's the function, I want you to run it. We're going to give that function two pieces of information, the number 1 and the number 3. So basically, this function says, all right, I'm going to create a variable using the keyword var. I'm going to call it JS random number, JavaScript random number. And it's going to use this bit of code right here, using the numbers 1 and 3 to generate the random number. So our random number is going to be inclusive, so it will be 1, 2, or 3. If you wanted the random number to be 1 through 5, you would change this to a 5. So now I've got a random number between 1 and 5. If you wanted it to be between 0 and 6, you would change those numbers to be 0, where the 1 is, and 6. So I'm just going to leave this between 1 and 3, so our only possibilities are 1, 2, or 3. All right, so once this line of code executes, we have this variable called JS random number. Using this line of code here where the alert is, alert means just throw up a box and display something to the user. So what I'm going to display is the contents of my variable JS random number. Basically display to the user my random number. So let's go ahead and check this out. If you want to preview your projects when you're using JavaScript, you shouldn't do it by using project or preview from the slide or preview the next 5 slides. It's because JavaScript is executed in the browser. So that means you need to actually you need to preview this in the browser preview. These options just kind of give you the Captivate preview, and you won't see your code working there. So I'm going to choose to preview in browser. That will give me the Swift version. You could also check it out in the HTML5 version in the browser, and both work. So here we are. You can see that we are on slide 1. So our CP info current slide variable is working. Now I'll click Get Random Number, and we get a pop-up box that says our random number is 3. So I'll click OK. And just for fun, I'll click again. And now this time our random number is 2. And I'll click again. And we got 2 again. And that time we got 1. So our random number is working well. So let's say that you want to pass your random number to Captivate. In the end, this isn't how we're going to have our project work, but let's do this so we can see how to pour variables from JavaScript down to Captivate and get those two different things talking. So I'm going to create a variable in Captivate that's going to catch or kind of contain that information that's coming down from JavaScript. So to create a variable in Captivate, I'm going to go to the Project menu and then choose Variables. And I want to create a new user-defined variable, one that's created by me. So I've got user here as the type, and I'm going to click Add New. And the name I'm going to give my variable is cap random number. Cap for Captivate. And I'll set the value of my random number initially to be 0. So it's going to start out as 0 every time, no matter what. And I could put a description, but I'll just click Save. And you can see that our new variable is now listed here as one of the ones available to our project. So here on slide 1, I want to display what that random number is. So I'm just going to insert a new text box. Whoops. So I'll click and put in a new text caption. And it's going to say the random number is. And then in this area, I am going to insert my variable so I can actually see what it is. So I've clicked my little insert variable box here in the property inspector. I want the user variable called cap random number, the one that I just created. And for maximum length, we'll leave that at 50. 50 characters should be plenty of space to display either 1, 2, or 3. So I'll click OK. Whoop, looks like I need to stretch this out a little bit. And I am just going to copy this text box and I'm going to paste it onto my other slides as well so we can see what our random number is at any given point within the project. Okay, so we're all set up with our variables. How do we actually get JavaScript to take the information in the random number and hand it over to Captivate? Well, here's how we do it. I'm going to click my Get Random Number button. I'm going to click my script window to open that back up. Now back here in our function where we were before, so the random number is created, we're throwing up an alert box to say what it was, and now we're also going to pass it to Captivate. So we're going to do that by typing window.cp API interface. Okay, so here is what is going on here. When you preview a project in a browser, or when you publish a project from Captivate, you end up with an HTML page. So in that browser, on that HTML page, you can refer to that page as window. Then also available to you in the browser is your JavaScript functions. JavaScript comes bundled up with modern browsers kind of by default. People can turn it off, but most people don't. So in JavaScript, you can access alert or random like we did in our code already. You can create variables designated by the keyword var. You can do all kinds of stuff that is available to you with JavaScript. Now there's also this special thing that's called CP API interface, or also called the common JS interface. This is some code and tools that were created by the engineers at Adobe that allow you to access your Captivate project when you're viewing it through a browser. So as it says here, that's what talks to Captivate and allows you to access its variables. So some of the commands that you could use would be get variable. That would mean, hey, JavaScript, reach down into Captivate and grab a certain variable. Or set variable. Hey, JavaScript, take a variable and place it down into Captivate. Other commands that exist are play and next, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. So that's what's going on here. We're saying, hey, browser, look in the window, use the CPAI interface to reach into Captivate and set the variable called Captivate random number to be equal to our JavaScript random number. So I'm going to click OK. Let's see if this works. So I'm going to preview my project. This time we'll preview it as HTML5. Why not? So here we are on our start screen. We're on slide 1. The random number is 0. The random number in Captivate is 0. I'm going to click to get my random number. JavaScript executes. Our random number is now 2. I'm going to click OK, and you can see that JavaScript has passed that variable down to Captivate. So we have our random number. Now let's use that to control what slide the user ends up on. So I'm going to go back to my script window here. And I'm going to write an if statement. Basically, we're going to say if the random number is 1, go to slide 2. If the random number is 2, go to slide 3. If it's 3, then go to slide 4. That is kind of a lot of typing. So again, I'm just going to go to my code editor here and copy and paste my code into my function. I'm going to use it. I'm going to put it just within the same function. It would be better if I had it as a separate function, but we're just, for simplicity's sake, we're just going to have this all in one function. So you can see what we do here. If our JavaScript random number is equal to 1, start at the window, reach into Captivate, find the variable called cp command go to slide, and set it to 1. Basically, we're saying, hey, Captivate, go to slide 1. Hey, Captivate, if the random number is 2, go to slide 2. Hey, Captivate, if it's 3, go to slide 3. Now you might be wondering, oh, hold on. Slide 1 is the introduction slide, or the one where you click to get the random number. Shouldn't these numbers be different? The answer is no. The way that Captivate counts slides is actually the first slide is slide 0, and then this is slide 1, and slide 3 is really slide 2, and so on. So our code here kind of sets up nicely for our JavaScript. It looks nice. If the random number is 1, go to slide 1. So let's go ahead and preview our project this time. All right, so we're on slide 1. The random number is 0. I'm going to click to get my random number, which is 2. I'll click OK, and I am successfully taken to slide 2. And then I can click to go to the end. Let's try it again. So I'll refresh, and so we're at slide 1. The random number is 0. Click to get a random number. This time my random number is 1, and we're taken to the correct slide once again. So our code is working. So this could hopefully be very useful. Maybe each one of these slides that you end up on randomly could be the start of a whole of 3 different branches, maybe a different scenario that begins on each one of those slides, or maybe a different series of questions. So based on a random number, your user could go through one of 3 different scenarios by chance, or some other situation to use the random number. So just a few things to wrap up. I want to go back to our JavaScript code and point out this line of code here, where we say window.cpi interface set variable value, this one right here, where we basically take the random number from JavaScript and we pass it down to Captivate. I could comment that out, which I'll do right now, and then go ahead and preview the project again, and it will still work just fine. Here you can see that when we click to get our random number, we get 1, and we are taken to slide 1 just fine. So JavaScript is what is driving the behavior of this project. That line of code was simply taking the random number and passing it from JavaScript to Captivate so we could display it here on the screen. And you can see here that our random number, the Captivate version of random number is still 0 because we commented out the line of code that passes it from JavaScript to Captivate. So I just wanted to point it out so that you are clear that JavaScript is what's really driving the show in this particular example, but also that you could see kind of how the code executes and also see how you can get JavaScript and Captivate to pass things back and forth. I also wanted to include that because I wanted to contrast 2 different lines of code here. So here in this line of code, you can see that we're using set variable value. And in this one, we're using set variable value as well. But we're also using, in this line of code where we're actually making the user jump to the correct slide, we're using this cp command go to slide. Now if you look up JavaScript and Captivate or any similar search term, you're probably going to end up at some point on this page that documents the common JS interface. And it's a really cool page. It does a nice job of explaining things. It lists for you here all of the different commands and codes that are available for you using the common JS interface. And if you look through it, you will notice, let's look for cp command go to slide. If you look through this, cp command go to slide is never mentioned on this page. So if you're wondering, well, how did you use this? How did you know to find this? That's because when you look at this documentation here, think of what's here as kind of shortcuts, or maybe the things that the Adobe engineers thought were most important to include in this interface right here. So there's get variable value, there's set variable value. We've used all of those, but you can also use things that aren't listed here. Our example here of using cp command go to slide is actually using one of the system variables that's available in Captivate. So if I go back to my project menu and go back to the variables and look at our system variables, and I'm just going to filter this by movie control variables, you can see here's cp command go to slide. And there's other ones here too, cp command mute, cp command next slide, and so on and so forth. So you can read the little descriptions of these and see how you would use these in order to control your Captivate project. Now these really were written for advanced actions in Captivate, but you can use them in JavaScript as well. So this example right here, cp command next slide, let me go back to brackets right here. Yes, if you use cp command next slide using cp API interface set variable value, cp command next slide, and then you set this to 1 equals true, 0 equals false. This is exactly the same as using window.cpAPIinterface.next. Now next is one of the ones that's documented here on the documentation page. But cp command next slide is not. But again, those two pieces of code do the exact same things. So if there's a system variable that you know exists within Captivate, you don't see it documented here, that's okay. You can still access it using set variable value, very much like we did here. And basically you just have to look in the variables, basically you just have to look in Captivate at the variables and see what kind of information it's looking for. Does it want a 1 to turn it on and a 0 to turn it off? Or just like in our example here, we used cp command go to slide and we told what slide number we wanted to go to. So there we go, maybe a slightly long-winded explanation of how to create a random number in JavaScript and pass it to Captivate, but it works, and I hope that this was helpful. Good luck.